Street estimates. Well, speaking of global outlook, the International Monetary Fund has raised India's growth forecast for the fiscal by 30 basis points to 6.8%. In its report, the IMF has cited robust domestic demand and rising working-age population as its reasons for upgrading India's growth projections. Ritu standing by with the details. Ritu, what does the IMF say?
That's right, IMF has raised India's growth forecast for the current fiscal to 6.8%, a 30 basis point upgrade from its previous forecast in January. But even at this estimate, it is below RBI's 7% GDP growth projection for FY25. Thereafter, IMF expects India's growth to slow down a tad to 6.5% by FY26. But IMF does say growth in India is projected to remain strong, with the robustness reflecting its continuing strength in domestic demand and a rising working age population. India's consumer price inflation is also seen slowing to 4.6% in this fiscal and 4.2% by the next. On the global front, IMF now expects less economic scarring from the pandemic for most countries than it earlier expected, with the exception of low-income countries who are still unable to turn the page from the pandemic. Global growth is expected to hold steady at 3.2% this year and the next, but the latest forecast for global growth 5 years from now at 3.1% is at its lowest in decades. Risks to global outlook are broadly balanced. On inflation, IMF says that global consumer price or retail inflation could fall to 5.9% this year and 4.5% the next year, with oil prices expected to fall by about 2.5% on average this year, which should help countries like India. Now, while the policy response from countries will have to be tailored to their needs, IMF does warn again that as the global economy approaches a soft landing, the near-term priority for central banks must be to ensure that inflation touches down smoothly by neither easing policies prematurely nor delaying too long. Countries must also build their fiscal buffers given the unfavorable debt dynamics, and especially so given that there are elections in many countries that can add to further fiscal pressures.